in a sleepy suburban neighborhood where every house looked identical and lawns were meticulously maintained, a secret simmered behind one ordinary door. Emily, a 23-year-old newlywed, had always appeared the picture of innocence and domestic bliss. She would wake early, prepare breakfast for her husband, Michael, and chat politely with neighbors, embodying the perfect young wife. Yet, beneath her polite smiles and everyday routines lay a restless heart, yearning for excitement beyond the monotony of her marriage. Across the street lived Mr. Harold Whitman, a 71-year-old widower with a sharp mind and a mysterious aura that intrigued Emily from the first time she saw him sitting on his porch, a book in hand, lost in thought. Their initial interactions were casually nod here, a smile there, but Emily felt an inexplicable pull towards him. Harold, too, noticed the spark in her eyes, something vibrant and youthful that reminded him of a lifelong past. Over weeks, the polite nods turned into small conversations about books, music, and shared loneliness. Emily would laugh at Harold's dry humor, and in return, he found her laughter infectious, a sound he hadn't heard fill a home in decades. The air between them shifted subtly, unnoticed by Michael, who was often consumed by his demanding job. The neighbors never suspected that behind Emily's sunny demeanor, a forbidden connection was growing, a bond that would soon blur the lines between affection, obsession, and danger. What started as innocent conversations evolved into secret notes slipped under doors, coded messages exchanged during grocery runs, and fleeting glances that ignited desire. Emily felt guilty, but couldn't resist the magnetic pull of a man who seemed to understand her in ways her husband never had. Late at night, she would lie awake, heart racing, replaying stolen moments with Harold, imagining conversations that might never happen, yet feeling the thrill of rebellion coursing through her veins. It was in this quiet suburb, among well-kept gardens and neatly trimmed hedges, that a clandestine romance took root, one that promised excitement but would soon spiral into deadly consequences. Their secret world was filled with whispered promises and stolen hours, a delicate dance of passion and danger. Emily's internal conflict deepened. Her love for her husband clashed with an irresistible attraction to Harold. Each encounter intensified her emotions, making it increasingly difficult to maintain the facade of normalcy. As the days turned into weeks, the intensity of their connection grew, feeding a fire that neither fully understood nor could control. It was a game of subtlety and secrecy, where a wrong glance or an accidental meeting could unravel everything. Yet, Emily and Harold continued, drawn to each other by a mix of desire, curiosity, and a profound loneliness that only they seemed capable of alleviating. In the unassuming streets lined with picket fences, a quiet storm was brewing, a story of temptation, betrayal, and inevitable tragedy slowly taking shape, one stolen moment at a time. The tension that had been quietly building between Emily and Harold finally manifested one sultry summer evening when chance or fate brought them together in the most intimate of ways. Emily had been running errands alone, ostensibly for groceries, but secretly planning an excuse to see Harold. She arrived at the small, locally owned cafe near the corner of their street, pretending to scan the shelves, but her eyes kept flicking to the door, anticipating his arrival. Harold, ever the gentleman, entered quietly, his tall frame slightly stooped with age, but his presence commanding nonetheless. Their eyes met, and a flicker of recognition passed between them, igniting a spark that neither could contain. They exchanged pleasantries, their voices low and measured, yet loaded with the unspoken thrill of secrecy. Every casual word seemed to resonate with double meanings, a code of affection and desire only they could decipher. Emily laughed softly at something Harold said, a sound that seemed to draw him in closer, and she felt a rush of adrenaline at the proximity. The cafe was busy with the mundane chatter of other patrons, yet in that corner an invisible bubble of intimacy enclosed them, separating them from the rest of the world. Harold leaned forward slightly, and Emily felt her heart hammer in her chest. She told herself it was harmless a conversation between neighbors, but she could feel the subtle brush of danger beneath the surface, the risk of discovery making her pulse race. As the evening progressed, they spoke of books, art, and moments from their pasts, each conversation revealing layers of themselves that had been hidden from the world. Emily marveled at how someone so much older could be so in tune with her thoughts, her dreams, and her unspoken frustrations. Harold, in turn, found in her energy and youth a revival of his own passions, a second chance at experiencing connection and intimacy in a world that had become painfully quiet after the death of his wife years ago. By the time they left the cafe, night had fallen, and the streets were bathed in the golden glow of streetlights. They walked side by side, careful to maintain the illusion of casual neighborliness. Yet every step was charged with anticipation and forbidden longing. Emily returned home with a mixture of exhilaration and guilt swirling inside her. She thought about the stolen moments, the way Harold's gaze lingered a second too long, and realized that the line between friendship and something far more dangerous had blurred irrevocably. That night, lying in bed beside her unsuspecting husband, Michael, Emily replayed every word, every gesture, feeling a secret heat ignite within her that she had never experienced before. She wondered if Harold felt the same pull, the same irresistible gravity that made each encounter impossible to resist. And Harold, in his quiet home across the street, did the same, staring at the ceiling, imagining the life that could be theirs if rules, morals, and societal expectations did not exist. Little did either of them know that this first forbidden encounter, seemingly innocent and private, would set a chain of events in motion that neither could control, drawing them ever deeper into a web of deception, obsession, and ultimately tragedy. Their secret love, nascent and fragile, was beginning to take shape, and in its shadow lurked consequences that would one day cost them everything they held dear, blurring the lines between passion, obsession, and the deadly allure of forbidden desire. As the days passed after their first clandestine meeting at the cafe, Emily and Harold's connection deepened, morphing into a secret world of hidden messages, furtive glances, and stolen moments that neither could resist. Emily became a master of subtlety, carefully orchestrating her daily routines so that each encounter with Harold felt organic yet charged with meaning. Notes began to appear mysteriously slipped under doors, tucked between the pages of library books, or left in envelopes on the porch, each one a small token of affection, each one a spark that reignited the forbidden flame. Emily's heart would race whenever she discovered one of Harold's messages, each written word carrying weight beyond its simplicity, conveying longing, curiosity, and a connection that transcended age and social boundaries. They developed a silent language, a set of gestures and glances that conveyed everything from longing to reassurance, ensuring that no one else in the neighborhood suspected the intensity of their secret bond. At home, Emily's behavior oscillated between guilt and anticipation. She smiled at Michael, made small talk as if nothing were amiss, yet her mind was consumed with thoughts of Harold. She replayed every shared laugh, every whispered word, every subtle touch that had brushed against her skin, feeling an intoxicating mixture of excitement and trepidation. Harold, too, was caught in a web of emotions he hadn't felt in decades, a mix of desire, exhilaration, and fear of discovery that fueled the intensity of their interactions. They would find excuses to meet briefly at the corner store, during neighborhood walks, or while tending to the garden, each encounter brief yet laden with unspoken promises and intense longing. The risk of being caught heightened the thrill, making every meeting feel like a daring act of rebellion against the constraints of ordinary life. Emily became more daring, sending texts when Michael was at work, arranging for brief encounters that allowed her to experience a sense of freedom and excitement she had never known in her marriage. Harold responded with equal fervor, his words carefully chosen yet charged with unspoken desire, and the correspondence became a lifeline for both, a means of connecting in ways that words alone could not capture. Yet beneath the surface of this exhilarating secrecy, tension simmered. Emily began to feel the strain of maintaining a double life, the fear that any misstep could shatter everything. She would look at Michael with a pang of guilt, knowing she was betraying not only him but the life they had built together, yet unable to resist the magnetic pull of Harold's presence. Harold, on his part, was aware of the moral and social boundaries they were crossing, but felt powerless to deny the connection that had awakened in him a sense of vitality he had long thought lost. Each note, each glance, each fleeting moment became a ritual, a dangerous dance along the edge of morality and desire, drawing them ever closer while isolating them from the world around them. It was a delicate balance of secrecy and longing, of exhilaration and fear, where the line between passion and obsession blurred with each passing day. As their hidden romance grew, the seeds of a far-reaching tragedy were being sown, with every whispered word and furtive glance pushing them further down a path that would soon lead to irreversible consequences. In the quiet suburban streets, among neighbors oblivious to the tension, Emily and Harold were trapped in an invisible web of desire, secrecy, and impending doom. A story of forbidden love that teetered on the edge of destruction. As Emily and Harold's secret relationship intensified, the thrill of stolen moments began to be shadowed by the first subtle signs of danger, a creeping sense that their forbidden love could not remain hidden forever. Emily's behavior at home grew increasingly erratic. Small slips of attention, distant gazes, and hurried phone calls, raising the faintest suspicions in Michael, though he remained largely oblivious to the magnitude of her betrayal. At the same time, Harold began to feel the weight of his actions pressing heavily on him, a gnawing anxiety that this clandestine affair, exciting as it was, might have consequences far beyond what either of them could imagine. They met in increasingly risky situations, quiet alleyways behind grocery stores, deserted parks at twilight, and occasionally inside Harold's dimly lit study, where the musty smell of old books and polished wood created an atmosphere of secrecy and intimacy. Every encounter carried the electric charge of danger, each touch, each whispered word amplified by the risk of discovery. Emily's inner conflict intensified. The love she felt for Harold and the passion that burned between them clashed violently with the loyalty she felt toward her husband. Nights became sleepless as she replayed every meeting, every stolen embrace, and worried about who might see or suspect the truth. Meanwhile, Harold, though captivated by Emily's youth and vitality, started experiencing moments of paranoia. He noticed neighbors glancing his way more often, the occasional hum of conversation pausing as they passed by, and a creeping fear that someone could uncover the affair, bringing shame, scandal, or worse into their quiet lives. Despite the tension, neither could resist the magnetic pull of their connection, meeting more frequently and leaving more daring signs of their love, hidden notes left in gardens, cryptic messages in books, and secret phone calls conducted with hushed tones in the night. But the thrill of danger was a double-edged sword, as each risky encounter not only intensified their connection but also exposed them to the growing threat of discovery. Emily noticed shadows under her husband's eyes, his subtle questions about her whereabouts, and fleeting moments of doubt that made her heart pound with guilt and fear. In parallel, Harold wrestled with the moral and legal implications of their relationship, aware that the age difference and societal norms made their liaison not only scandalous but potentially catastrophic. Their passion, once a source of excitement and escape, began to carry a sense of foreboding, as though the universe itself was warning them of the consequences to come. The tension between desire and danger escalated with each passing day, creating a volatile mix of emotions that neither Emily nor Harold could control. The line between love and obsession blurred further as they became entwined in a web of secrecy, lies, and escalating risk. Even as they clung to the moments of happiness they shared, the first whispers of impending tragedy began to echo in the corners of their minds, foreshadowing events that would spiral violently out of control. The quiet streets that had once offered safety now seemed suffocating. Every neighbor a potential witness, every passing car a threat, and every ring of the telephone a harbinger of doom. In this delicate balance of passion, fear, and secrecy, Emily and Harold were unwittingly stepping onto a dangerous path, one from which there might be no return, a path that would test the boundaries of morality, loyalty, and ultimately survival. By now, the once innocent thrill of Emily and Harold's secret meetings had evolved into an all-consuming obsession, a dangerous fixation that began dictating their thoughts, actions, and daily routines. Emily found herself daydreaming about Harold at work, her mind constantly drifting to the moments they had shared, imagining secret touches and whispered words that never occurred in public. Each time she returned home, she felt a pang of guilt, mixed with an insatiable longing that left her restless and distracted. Her marriage with Michael became increasingly strained, not due to overt conflict, but because Emily's emotional and mental presence was elsewhere, consumed by the clandestine relationship that had taken root. Harold, for his part, became equally consumed. He would linger on the street long after their brief encounters, replaying their conversations in his mind, analyzing Emily's tone and gaze for signs of affection, longing, or hesitation. He bought gifts he would never give publicly, wrote letters he never sent, and increasingly imagined scenarios where he and Emily could escape together, free from the scrutiny of the neighborhood and the constraints of social expectation. The obsession was mutual, fueled by secrecy, danger, and the intensity of an illicit connection that neither could resist. Their meetings became more frequent and daring, escalating from whispered conversations in alleyways to moments of physical closeness hidden in Harold's home when Michael was away. Every touch, every glance, every word exchanged was magnified by the forbidden nature of their love, amplifying both pleasure and anxiety. Emily's internal conflict deepened as she struggled to reconcile desire with guilt. She knew what they were doing was morally wrong, but the addiction to the thrill, the sense of being truly seen and understood by Harold, overpowered any sense of reason. Meanwhile, Harold's obsession became a silent burden, an ache in his chest and mind that he could neither escape nor resist. He began monitoring Emily's movements subtly, keeping track of when she left the house, who she met, and what she said, convinced that every detail mattered to the survival of their secret. The neighbors' casual chatter and innocent glances now seemed intrusive, a constant reminder that their secret could be exposed at any moment. In the privacy of their hidden world, Emily and Harold's obsession fed a dangerous escalation. Late-night phone calls turned into weekend rendezvous, small gestures into carefully planned encounters, and playful flirtations into declarations of longing neither dared speak aloud to the outside world. The intensity of their fixation blurred the boundaries between love, control, and dependency, leaving them vulnerable to rash decisions and emotional volatility. At home, Emily's behavior became increasingly erratic, alternating between moments of normalcy and sudden bursts of tension, fear, and longing. Michael noticed the changes but could not pinpoint the cause, attributing them to stress or fatigue, unaware that his young wife was ensnared in a web of desire, secrecy, and obsession with a man decades older. In Harold's home, the air grew thick with anticipation and anxiety, the bookshelves and old furniture silently witnessing a passion that society deemed unacceptable. The thrill of danger had morphed into a necessity, a lifeline neither could relinquish, yet both understood, consciously or subconsciously, that this obsession was a ticking time bomb. Each encounter, each note, and each clandestine moment drew them closer to a precipice, a point of no return where choices would no longer be reversible, and the consequences of their obsession could manifest in ways neither had fully imagined. In the quiet, sunlit streets of the suburb, the danger of discovery loomed ever closer, a shadow over a love that had grown intoxicating, consuming, and dangerously unstoppable. As Emily and Harold's clandestine relationship deepened, the delicate web of secrecy that had kept their affair hidden began to fray, threatening to expose them to the outside world. Subtle signs of suspicion emerged. Neighbors noticed Emily slipping out at odd hours. Michael's questions became sharper, tinged with doubt, and Harold began to sense a shift in the neighborhood's atmosphere, as if eyes were watching, judging, and waiting for the perfect moment to reveal their secret. Emily's paranoia escalated. Every phone call, every knock at the door, every casual conversation became a potential threat, forcing her to carefully calculate each move and lie to maintain the illusion of a normal life. Harold, too, felt the mounting pressure. His careful planning once sufficient to maintain secrecy, now seemed fragile, and the once comforting walls of his home felt increasingly like a trap. Their encounters, once thrilling and liberating, were now laced with tension and fear, each meeting a gamble that could expose everything. Despite the anxiety, neither could resist the pull of their connection. The emotional and physical intensity of their affair had grown too strong, binding them together with a force that overrode reason. Hidden messages evolved from simple notes to more elaborate communications-coded letters, secretive phone apps, and carefully timed meetings, each attempt to protect their secret, also increasing the risk of discovery. Emily felt herself spiraling, caught between love, guilt, and fear, her emotional state fragile and volatile. She began to experience moments of dread, so acute that they paralyzed her. And yet she returned again and again to Harold, driven by a mix of desire and dependency that made leaving him seem impossible. Harold's obsession mirrored hers. He monitored Emily's activities, anticipated her thoughts, and arranged meetings with meticulous care, each encounter carefully plotted to avoid detection. Yet the more careful he became, the more consumed he felt, his mind increasingly dominated by the young woman, who had awakened something in him that decades of solitude had never managed to stir. As their relationship teetered on the brink of exposure, small cracks in their facade began to show. Michael noticed subtle changes in Emily's behavior, furtive glances at her phone, inexplicable absences, and moments of agitation that she could not hide. Though he had no idea of the true nature of her secret, the tension in the household grew palpable, foreshadowing conflict that could no longer be ignored. Across the street, Harold's solitude began to fracture as the consequences of their actions edged closer. Friends and acquaintances started to make passing remarks about Emily, her presence and her routines, creating an atmosphere thick with scrutiny and unspoken questions. The sense of danger became almost suffocating, and yet the pair clung to each other with a desperate intensity, unwilling to let go, despite knowing that the stakes had escalated beyond their control. In this chapter of their story, the consequences of passion and secrecy began to manifest in subtle but undeniable ways, warning them that every stolen moment brought them closer to disaster. The thrill of their forbidden love was now accompanied by fear, suspicion, and the inexorable weight of truth pressing closer with each passing day, signaling that the next steps they took could irrevocably alter their lives forever. By now, what had begun as a secret flirtation had escalated into a dangerous, almost uncontrollable affair, one that carried risks far beyond the thrill of forbidden love. Emily and Harold found themselves entwined in a relationship where the stakes were no longer simply emotional. They had crossed a line that made every encounter a potential catalyst for disaster. Emily, increasingly addicted to the intensity of her connection with Harold, began taking reckless actions, leaving Michael's side for hours without explanation, meeting Harold in secluded places with little regard for the consequences, and engaging in conversations over the phone that could easily be overheard. The exhilaration of secrecy was being replaced by a gnawing sense of vulnerability, and yet she could not stop herself. Harold, too, was teetering on the edge of obsession. He monitored Emily constantly, internalizing every interaction, replaying moments obsessively, and imagining scenarios in which they could abandon their lives for a new, hidden existence together. Their emotional dependency had become symbiotic, feeding a cycle of desire, guilt, and escalating risk that neither could escape. The danger of discovery was no longer abstract. It loomed over them like a dark cloud. Every neighbor glance, every casual comment, every social interaction a potential threat to the fragile world they had built. Emily's marriage, once a stable and comforting institution, had become a cage. And yet, leaving Michael entirely was a prospect fraught with moral and practical complications. The idea of running away with Harold flickered in her mind constantly, tempting her with freedom yet terrifying her with its impossibility. Each meeting became a delicate dance between passion and prudence. The risk intensified the thrill, a late-night rendezvous in Harold's study, a secret touch as he guided her hand over a book, a whispered word in a shadowed corner of the neighborhood, all amplified by the fear of being caught. The secrecy and tension fed the obsession, but also sowed seeds of paranoia and mistrust. Small mistakes, an overheard conversation, a misplaced note, a neighbor's sudden presence threw them into panic, forcing them to adapt quickly to maintain their illusion of discretion. Their relationship, once simple in its clandestine excitement, had become a complex web of lies, manipulation, and emotional dependence, leaving little room for reason or foresight. Emily's thoughts were a whirlwind of love, desire, guilt, and fear, and Harold's mind was equally consumed by anxiety, anticipation, and obsession. The boundary between passion and danger had blurred entirely. Every action, every choice carried weighty consequences, and yet neither could step back without risking losing the object of their desire. As the days passed, the relationship began to dominate every aspect of their lives. The emotional intensity was exhausting but irresistible, drawing them closer even as the shadows of potential ruin lengthened. In this chapter of their story, the romance had transformed into a perilous game of secrecy, where desire, obsession, and fear intertwined. Each encounter carried the possibility of exposure, each whispered word the potential for scandal, and each fleeting touch a step further down a path that promised both ecstasy and disaster. The suburban streets that had once seemed safe were now a labyrinth of risk, the private corners of their homes haunted by the tension of illicit passion. And the once hidden relationship had begun to take on a life of its own, growing uncontrollably and dangerously beyond their control. The intensity of Emily and Harold's secret affair had now reached a tipping point, a stage where passion, obsession, and fear collided with potentially catastrophic consequences. What had once been a thrill was now a dangerous habit, a need that neither could deny, and the tension in their daily lives had grown unbearable. Emily's thoughts were consumed entirely by Harold, each moment of separation feeling like a small torment. She found herself making increasingly reckless choices, sneaking out of the house at odd hours, concocting elaborate lies to justify her absences, and meticulously avoiding any interaction that might hint at the secret life she was leading. Her guilt for deceiving Michael gnawed at her constantly. Yet the adrenaline and intimacy she experienced with Harold were intoxicating, making the moral weight almost unbearable, yet impossible to resist. Harold, similarly, was caught in a cycle of obsession and anticipation. He began arranging meetings at more secluded locations, places where discovery was unlikely, but the tension was maximized, heightening the emotional intensity of each encounter. Every touch, glance, and word was laden with meaning, creating a feedback loop of desire and risk that neither could escape. The secret world they had built was now fully consuming them, shaping their thoughts, influencing their behavior, and isolating them from the outside world. Neighbors, once oblivious, now cast curious glances, and casual remarks began to feel like threats. Michael's concern deepened. He noticed Emily's distracted demeanor, the furtive checking of phones, and the uncharacteristic restlessness that seemed to haunt her, though he had no clue the truth behind it. The stakes escalated further when a note meant for Harold was nearly discovered by Michael, creating a moment of panic that left Emily shaking and hyper-aware of the precarious position they were in. Harold, too, felt the first sharp pangs of fear that their affair could implode, destroying not only their reputations but also the fragile emotional balance of their lives. Yet the need for connection overpowered logic. Each secret meeting reinforced their attachment, making the world outside feel distant and irrelevant. They existed in a bubble where only their desires, fears, and obsessions mattered, oblivious to the slow erosion of their safety and morality. The tipping point was inevitable. Emotional intensity, secrecy, and obsession were combining to create a volatile mix where one wrong decision could trigger a chain reaction of irreversible consequences. Emily's inner conflict escalated. She loved the thrill and emotional intimacy she found with Harold, but feared the impending disaster that seemed to loom over them both. Harold, too, oscillated between exhilaration and dread, aware of the danger but powerless to resist the gravitational pull of their connection. Every glance, whispered word, and fleeting touch was now heavy with consequence, foreshadowing the calamity that was quietly approaching, like a shadow stretching over the bright suburban streets. In this chapter, the affair had fully transformed into a perilous obsession, a force that dominated their lives and clouded their judgment. The balance between desire, morality, and safety had disappeared entirely, leaving only a high-stakes game of passion, secrecy, and inevitable destruction, where one misstep could unleash consequences far beyond their control, ultimately steering both Emily and Harold toward a tragedy neither could have anticipated. By this point, Emily and Harold's forbidden affair had spun completely out of control, a dangerous spiral fueled by obsession, desire, and secrecy, leaving both of them teetering on the edge of disaster. The thrill of their encounters had now been overtaken by a tense, suffocating anxiety as the risk of discovery loomed over every word, glance, and movement. Emily's home life had deteriorated almost imperceptibly but inevitably. She was emotionally distant from Michael, her laughter forced, her conversations clipped, and her mind always drifting to the next encounter with Harold. Each lie she told to conceal her whereabouts and intentions grew heavier, creating a gnawing guilt that threatened to consume her from within. Harold, on the other hand, was gripped by a mix of exhilaration and paranoia. He constantly scrutinized the neighborhood, fearing that any neighbor, delivery person, or passing stranger might notice the intensity of their connection and expose them. Every meeting was planned with meticulous care, yet the thrill of danger that had once fueled them now carried a foreboding weight, a constant reminder that the situation was spiraling beyond their control. The psychological tension between them intensified, creating a volatile mix of passion, fear, and obsession. Minor conflicts, disagreements over timing or communication were magnified, creating tempers and insecurities that neither had previously experienced. Emily's sense of morality clashed violently with her desires, each clandestine interaction leaving her simultaneously elated and terrified. Meanwhile, Harold's age and experience made him more aware of the potential fallout. Yet the magnetic pull of Emily's youth and vitality rendered him incapable of restraint. Their once carefree secret meetings were now punctuated by moments of extreme caution, fear, and calculation. Yet the emotional intensity had never been higher. Each encounter became a high-stakes gamble, where one misstep could shatter everything they had built in the shadows. As the spiral deepened, both began to take risks they would have previously considered unthinkable, leaving notes in less secure locations, meeting in public with only minimal precautions, and allowing themselves to linger in situations where discovery was imminent. This reckless abandon only accelerated the descent toward tragedy. In the midst of this tension, Michael's awareness of subtle changes grew stronger. He began noticing patterns he hadn't before. Emily's frequent absences, unusual texting habits, sudden evasiveness, and a distracted demeanor that suggested more than mere fatigue. Though he did not yet know the full truth, his suspicions edged closer to clarity, threatening to break the fragile secrecy of the affair. The dangerous interplay of desire, secrecy, and obsession created a scenario where every decision had amplified consequences. Emily and Harold were no longer in control of the narrative. The momentum of their passion had taken on a life of its own, pushing them inexorably toward an outcome neither had anticipated. In this chapter, the story reached its critical juncture, with the affair having fully morphed into a perilous force. The tension between illicit love, fear of exposure, and emotional dependency left them vulnerable to catastrophic outcomes. And the suburban streets that had once offered a backdrop of normalcy now seemed like a maze of risk and impending doom. The spiral toward tragedy had begun, setting in motion a sequence of events that would soon culminate in heartbreak, revelation, and, ultimately, the fatal consequences of their choices. The culmination of Emily and Harold's secret affair arrived like a storm no one could have predicted. The passion, obsession, and secrecy that had defined their lives now erupting into an irreversible tragedy. The once thrilling rendezvous and stolen moments had created a volatile environment, where every decision carried weighty consequences, and the line between desire and danger had disappeared entirely. On a fateful evening, Emily and Harold arranged a secret meeting in Harold's dimly lit home, the air thick with anticipation, tension, and the unspoken awareness that something had changed, an intuition that this night would alter their lives forever. Emily's pulse raced as she approached the house, heart pounding, a mixture of exhilaration and dread coiling in her stomach. Harold, equally anxious, greeted her with a nervous smile, the usual calm and control replaced by an almost desperate intensity. Their conversation, once playful and flirtatious, became charged with emotion, each word carrying the weight of fear, longing, and the unspoken acknowledgement of their precarious position. A sudden noise, a creaking floorboard, the faint rustle of the street outside made Emily flinch. The very risk that had fueled their passion now threatened to shatter it completely. In a moment of recklessness, fueled by heightened emotion and obsessive desire, the interaction escalated beyond control. The tension, pent-up emotion, and blurred boundaries of age, morality, and secrecy culminated in a fatal misstep. What began as a private affair ended in a violent and tragic confrontation, leaving both stunned by the irreversible consequences of their choices. Emily, in a state of shock and disbelief, realized the gravity of what had occurred. Harold, similarly, faced the stark reality that their actions had crossed a point of no return. The quiet suburb, once a place of mundane safety, was now a scene of devastation, with neighbors unaware of the dark events that had unfolded behind closed doors. Michael, unaware of the affair in its entirety until that moment, was confronted with betrayal, heartbreak, and grief, struggling to comprehend how a secret love had led to such irreversible tragedy. The emotional fallout extended beyond the immediate participants, touching families, friends, and the wider community in unexpected ways. Law enforcement, investigation, and the slow unraveling of truth brought to light the dangerous intensity of obsession, the consequences of forbidden desire, and the fragility of trust within relationships. In the aftermath, the story of Emily and Harold became a cautionary tale, illustrating how passion intertwined with secrecy and obsession can escalate into devastating outcomes. The events highlighted the destructive potential of forbidden love when combined with human vulnerability, impulsiveness, and a lack of restraint. Their romance, which had begun with innocent fascination and secret longing, ultimately ended in death and tragedy, leaving a permanent mark on all involved. The suburban streets that had once witnessed quiet domesticity now bore the weight of scandal, heartbreak, and moral reflection. The narrative concluded with the sobering realization that choices, even those made in pursuit of desire or emotional fulfillment, carry consequences that ripple far beyond the immediate moment. Emily and Harold's story serves as a haunting reminder of how love, when twisted by obsession and secrecy, can lead to destruction, heartbreak, and the irrevocable consequences of human passion unchecked by morality or foresight. In the end, the tragedy was complete, the secret exposed, and the lives of all involved forever altered by the dangerous power of forbidden desire.